I'm Nahlah Ayed, host of CBC Ideas. This federal election campaign has been overshadowed by one overarching issue. How do we as Canadians deal with Donald Trump? That has left little space to discuss other important matters like how do we revitalize our democracy? In our series, Ideas for a Better Canada, we held public discussions in 4 cities in search of local ideas that can inspire national change. In Charlottetown, the Fathers of Confederation began to map out what a country could be in 1864. Today, people engage in the political process here in ways that seem unimaginable in the rest of Canada. It's also where people are once again starting to talk about electoral reform. And our first guest, appropriately, is my colleague, CBC Charlottetown's legislative or provincial reporter, Carrie Campbell. Welcome, Carrie.
Happy to be here.
Okay, and you've been covering politics on this island for 2 decades. And so I'm wondering what you think makes P.E.I.'s political scene unique to other provinces.
Well, I think if you want to understand, there are stories that Islanders love to tell and that I always love to hear about the 2003 election. So until Fiona hit a few years ago, I think Hurricane Juan was the most destructive storm that ever hit P.E.I. Certainly it was within the memories of anyone who was around back then. Juan made landfall. I was just looking this up. It was sometime after 3 a.m. on September 29th, and that was Election Day.
Wow.
Now, everyone in this room knows what it's like to wake up the morning after your community was just devastated by a hurricane. If you haven't experienced that, I don't know how to explain it. It is a really surreal experience. But the vote went ahead. There's thanks for everyone who worked hard to make it happen. And there's no mention of the voter turnout, but I can tell you that the voter turnout was 85%.
Incredible.
Many of those Islanders voting by candlelight because power had gone out to 2/3 of the province.
What I want to know is what would the turnout have been had there not been?
Well, a big part of it, I think, is because P.E.I. is small, and so there's just a closer connection, a more personal, intimate level of connection with our politicians, for one thing. Something that people from the rest of Canada might not realize is for most of the land in P.E.I., there's no municipal government, so your provincial MLA is the person that you're probably going to call if you want to complain about a pothole, or if you want to complain because you don't have a family doctor, or if you or one of your teenage kids is looking for a summer job. I know it's been suggested maybe we shouldn't call our MLAs for all these things, but it tends to be what happens. Also, just from talking to Islanders for years, I can tell you that there is this connection and passion and understanding at a really fundamental level about the fact that this matters in their lives.
Yeah. But what does this say, do you think, fundamentally about the people of this province and their commitment to democracy?
Well, so every morning I take my dog for a walk and I pass this neighbor's house and he still has a sign in the window. It says, "Honor the vote." And that came from that 2016 ballot where Islanders actually chose proportional representation from among 5 different electoral models as their preferred model. The premier of the day said, well, that turnout actually was not very good, so we're not going ahead with that. But I think there is, again, that understanding of what's at stake, how much this matters. And that honor the vote thing, that was an issue about fairness. There were people who didn't even want to see change, but they felt, well, that wasn't fair to have that vote and then not follow through with the results are. I know people who are advocating for a change in our electoral system talk about fairness, and that's clearly from the fact that what we saw in 2016 from that vote, the fact that sign is in that window still, that resonates on P.E.I.
So a real strong sense of fairness. Thank you, Carrie. We're going to come back to you, but we're going to make the round here. And next, for us to really look ahead into the future, it really is worth looking back to get a better sense of how we got here. To help us do that, here is Ed McDonald, Professor Emeritus in the History Department at the University of Prince Edward Island, specializing in the province's political and social history. Welcome, Ed McDonald.
Hi.
great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I am wondering if you could pick up where Carrie kind of left off and just talk about what some of the unique qualities that you think of politics here on P.E.I. going back to its early years.
Well, Carrie has said a lot of things I agree with, but when we think of democracy, the concept of democracy that we have in Canada really originated in Greece, and it was meant to work in small states, and really a city level. So the microstate, the small place, seemed to be the place where rule by the people was going to thrive. Now, who the people were, how their will would be expressed, has changed and altered and has been a challenge. But I think part of the reason that we have a strong democracy here is because it is a small place, physically small, and also the population is small. So Carrie had mentioned, not only does everyone know who the MLA is, it's not just his name, her name, their name. They know the person, but the MLA also knows who the voters are on an individual basis.
Right.
And I've talked to MLAs over many years, and they feel a duty towards those people.
Does that make them more responsive to the complaints they hear?
I think it does. They feel a duty, not in a general way to some anonymous mass of voters. They feel a duty of care towards the individual people.
Next up, we have Sarah Outram. She is Executive Director of the P.E.I. Coalition for Women's Leadership. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
So I hear you've been involved in politics, in wearing a number of hats with different organizations, and specifically, in the realm that encourages engagement, as Ed was talking about, in the electoral process. You've also, in that process, you would have seen firsthand how difficult it is for certain groups like women or minorities or people who aren't represented traditionally in the political system, how hard it is for them to find a place in the political landscape and to get involved. What are some of those barriers here on this island?
Oh, there are unfortunately still some, yes. You might have heard the exasperation in my voice there for a moment. There are many barriers. So with the P.E.I. Coalition for Women's Leadership, we predominantly focus on women. And it is still wild to me that women are approximately 51% of the population and have never exceeded 26% of our legislature as representation. That's wild to me. And municipally, it's never been over 40. And then looking at federally, well, it's never been more than 1 out of the 4.
Wow. And to stay on the negative side of the ledger, for people who are involved in politics or who try to get involved in politics, cyberbullying is an issue. In other words, harassments, threats online. Just tell me about the work that you've done in that area.
Absolutely. So I almost hesitate to use the word cyberbullying because bullying tends to be associated with youth. And the term that we use is technology-facilitated gender-based violence, which I apologize is a hefty term, but it is used for a reason because technology-facilitated, you don't have to have an internet connection. Gender-based, I think, pretty self-explanatory. But the term violence is important to include there. Now, some of our work from the 2023 provincial election was doing firsthand interviews with women candidates and non-binary candidates who had stepped forward to run. And they had some unfortunate experiences. I can think of one in particular. As we know, the internet does not have borders and impacts a lot of our lives and our democracy. And they were receiving threats from another province for their actions, for being civically engaged. And the purpose of that violence is to silence and to exclude. And we want to equip women and other diverse individuals with tools to protect themselves, while at the same time advocating for systemic level changes.
As we mentioned earlier, this is a province, is one of the few that's taken the initiative to try to change the way that it does voting, going all the way back to the failed referendum in 2005. And Carrie, I know that electoral reform is an issue that you've covered closely and that you're extremely interested in. And so I thought perhaps we could talk with you again and then have you engage in the conversation as well. But first, can you just describe what critics of our current first past the post see as undemocratic?
Well, I mean, the argument you keep hearing, and I'm drawing a lot on what proponents of proportional representation will say, because that's been most of the debates we've had here, but I think it also is the same if you're advocating for a system like preferential ballot. Under first past the post, we get a lot of what people call wasted votes. So the other way to look at it is, in this federal election that's coming up, there's a lot of seats that are going to be won with, maybe around 40% of the vote. The outcome would have been the same in each one of those ridings if the 60% of the voters stayed home. They didn't change anything. So that's one of the criticisms. There's also, I guess, this commentary that kind of our winner-takes-all approach affects everything about the way we work politics in Canada, the way people campaign, the ideas that they bring forward, the way you have to practice politics to be successful. If you imagined yourself in the war room of one of the federal parties right now, there's a magic number you need in terms of voter support. It's 36% or something. You don't look for ideas that are going to be palatable to a majority of Canadians. You just need to motivate that 36% and get them to vote for you. So the argument being that if you had a system where I'll add one more point to that too. We know the federal parties are going to focus in the GTA, in BC, and in Quebec, because that's where elections are decided. All of this is a function of the way we do votes. If a party, say if the Conservatives could benefit by getting even more votes in Alberta, then they might pay attention to Alberta, but they know they have it locked up. So all of those are kind of some of the critiques we get of the way we do it now.
Okay. After the break, we'll look at ideas for electoral reform. Welcome back. This federal election is being contested using the first past the post system. It's the way we've always done it in Canada. But is there a better way to choose a government? That's the question we tackle next in Charlottetown. I'd like to bring another voice into this chat specifically about electoral reform. Our next guest on stage is Chris Ortenberger. She's a member of Islanders for Proportional Representation. And I'm guessing that you two know each other.
Yeah, I've met Chris. Yeah.
You've seen each other before. Chris, you've been involved with the proportional representation movement since around 2011. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
What is it that initially sparked your interest in this area?
The PR thing has been something I think that a lot of people have thought it's just the next level of evolution in our democracy. And I know Ed is like the expert on reminding us of like when our electoral system, time to move on? Oh.
I'm saying, just finish that thought,
okay.
Yeah.
On when things have continued to evolve as far as more people being given the right to vote and changing our system so that it's more definitely more fair and more working together is important and a big part of trying to get a chance at proportional representation.
I want to bring in Carrie here because she's far better informed about this than I am. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Carrie, for you two to have a conversation.
Yeah, Chris, so in the time that you've been involved in the electoral reform movement in P.E.I., we had that 2016 plebiscite where Islanders were asked which of these 5 electoral models should we go with, and then the honor the vote movement after that concluded, but nothing changed. And then the 2019 vote, which was part of the 2019 provincial election. I think we were so focused on the provincial election that night, which gave us our first functional minority government in PEI. We didn't pay a lot of attention to the result from that plebiscite, which, if you looked at a percentage of votes, it came pretty close. Yeah. I just wonder what you take away from the result of that, why you think Islanders didn't vote in the numbers necessary to make a change.
I think part of it is that there's a lot of ways that you can kind of frighten people not to think about proportional representation. I think a big one was feeling that people would lose their connection with their local MLA because in the one system, the mixed member proportional, the districts would be larger that you live in, but you would get that second vote for what they call the top-up representatives. And so there was a lot of I think, ways to make voters feel that it wasn't the best idea that was kind of coming from both ends of the island. And we weren't able to really address a lot of those.
Yeah, it's funny because every time this debate plays out in Canada, ultimately it comes to this government that was elected under the existing electoral system that's in charge of trying to decide whether we change, and we've seen that that can be a difficult thing to get over the finish line. But 2019 wasn't supposed to be the end, right? There was a motion passed in the legislature. It was supported by all three parties. I can see, I think, at least two of the MLAs here who supported that, that called on a citizens' assembly to have another run at this. It was left with the Premier's office, and then that's where it died. Yeah. But you now, I understand you're trying to get the band back together, and you had talked earlier about some of the critiques there were over the years about the proposals in P.E.I. for change, that there were concerns that these electoral districts will be too big. It's funny if you're not from P.E.I. to think about that, but that was a real concern. The 2005 model, there were concerns about the fact that there were these long lists of candidates that were just put forward by the parties, right? So let's say you landed a spot on this potential future citizens' assembly. What does your perfect electoral system for P.E.I. look like?
I think it's I think this mixed member where you can find out, can go to meetings and figure out which set of people that a party selects for that top-up list. So it's not like it's secret people you don't know or something. But you still vote for the person in your district. And I was thinking about that when people think about the districts getting bigger a little bit, if I want to find my MLA, I can usually find my MLA. If my MLA does not want to be found, then I know people who cannot find their MLA. So I don't think that adding a few thousand people to a district is going to change that wonderful kind of closeness we do have with our elected officials.
Yeah. Carrie and Chris, thank you very much. Last but not least, we are joined on the stage by Sadie McNeel, who is a fourth-year political science student at the University of Prince Edward Island. And in 2023, she revived the U.P.E.I. Political Science Society. And let me read you a little bit from the description of this organization. And I'm quoting, it's a place, quote, where we take politics and turn it into a circus, complete with juggling politicians and the occasional unicycle ride through a labyrinth of bureaucracy. I hope that your group meetups kind of live up to the, the description. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I want to know why you decided that this group had to return to existence. Why did you revive it?
Okay, so initially I revived the group in order to make friends. And then once I made those friends, they helped me take it in a direction. And we saw that young people really didn't have a chance to talk to politicians. They didn't have a chance to converse with MLAs and feel like they could say what they wanted and feel like they're in a safe space to have an opinion that might be wrong heard. I think it's really important that young people are able to make mistakes towards politics and that we're a safe space to do that.
Tell me about those events. What exactly you do at those events? Yeah.
So usually we host politician meet and greets is what we call them. And we'll have either a provincial MLA, a federal MP, someone come in, and they'll do about 30 minutes of talking about whatever they want to talk about. And it's always interesting what direction they take it in. And then, after their time, we open it up to the students, and we allow students to ask their questions to politicians. And I know I personally am always very surprised by how knowledgeable students are on everything happening in Canada and even outside of P.E.I.
How often does it actually turn into a circus?
Oh. 9 out of 10.
What do you think you can accomplish in a gathering like that, you know, an ordinary political meeting with an MLA couldn't?
Mm-hmm. So it really fills a gap, I find, in democracy where young people aren't being heard as much. And I also find that we've had like tangible results from our meet and greets. Like I know some students have gotten jobs or they've gone off to network with these people. And so it creates a real avenue that wasn't there before and is really important for young people to have and to know about.
Perhaps there's more, it appears to be, there appears to be more idealism in this moment than there has been in a very long time. What can we do using this moment to move forward, again, to our benefit, rather than worrying about other countries?
So what you're saying is Donald Trump's actually doing us a favor?
You might say that. I'm not saying that. I'm proposing. Yeah. We
I
could do
think
without the favor.
If the turnout for the next election, federal election, is lower than the previous one, then I would say our democracy is in trouble. I think this should be a reminder, it should be a galvanizing factor in re-engaging Canadians with their system and taking a hard look at our system and how it works and how it's not working. So that's the opportunity that we have, the opportunity given to us by the circumstances we find ourselves in. The crisis, in some ways, is not too strong a word, that we find ourselves in. And I think Canadians are up for it.
Ideas for a Better Canada is a partnership with the Samara Centre for Democracy. To hear even more of those conversations, please listen to CBC Ideas on broadcast or podcast, or visit us at cbc.ca/bettercanada. A big thank you to the CBC Call Out Partnership Program for making this series possible. And thank you for tuning in.